Admiral Cathera stood on the bridge of his massive warship, looking at the screens that showed the human fleet ahead. He had done this same thing 47 times before with other alien races. Show up with overwhelming force, demand surrender, and watch the enemy give up without a fight. It always worked. The human ships looked small and weak compared to his 300 vessels. Their technology seemed basic, their weapons outdated. This would be over in minutes. Send the surrender message, Cathera ordered his communications officer. The message went out across space. Alien vessels, you have entered Vorthan territory. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction. Cathera waited for the usual response. Most species either surrendered immediately or tried to negotiate. A few foolish ones attempted to fight in formation, which made them easy to destroy. But the humans did something completely different. Instead of forming defensive lines or sending diplomatic messages, the human ships suddenly scattered in all directions like insects when light hits them. Each ship went a different way with no pattern that Cathera could see. Some dove toward nearby asteroids, others spun wildly through space, and a few actually headed straight toward his largest ships. "What are they doing?" asked his tactical officer, clicking his mandibles in confusion. "I have no idea," Cathera admitted. "Run an analysis on their movement patterns." The ship's computer worked for several seconds. No recognizable tactical formation detected. Movement appears random and chaotic. Cathera felt irritated. They must have some plan. No military force acts without a plan. All ships pursue and engage. Maintain standard attack formation. What happened next made no sense to anyone on the Vorthan bridge. A human fighter ship dove straight into an asteroid field, moving so fast it should have crashed into the floating rocks. Instead, the pilot weaved between the asteroids like he had memorized their positions. Then he did something incredible. He used his ship's engines to push a large asteroid directly into a Vorthan cruiser. "That's impossible," the tactical officer said. "The precision required for that maneuver is beyond calculation." But the human pilot wasn't done. As the Vorthan cruiser tried to avoid the asteroid, the human ship appeared from behind it, firing at the cruiser's engine core. The explosion lit up space for miles. On another part of the battlefield, a human cargo ship was being chased by 3 Vorthan fighters. The humans should have been destroyed easily, but instead of running away in a straight line, the cargo ship started spinning wildly while firing in all directions. It looked completely crazy, but somehow the random shots hit all 3 pursuing fighters. "How did they calculate those firing angles?" someone asked. "They didn't calculate anything," Cathera realized with growing alarm. "They're not following any calculations at all." The most shocking moment came when a human destroyer, clearly damaged and losing power, flew straight toward Cathera's flagship. Every tactical manual said this was suicide, a desperate final attack that would fail. "Destroy it before it gets close," Cathera ordered. But as his weapons fired at the human ship, it suddenly changed course at the last second. The human vessel slammed into a Vorthan supply ship instead, and the explosion created a chain reaction that destroyed 3 more Vorthan vessels. The human ship was gone, but it had taken out 4 enemy ships in what looked like a crazy accident. Except Cathera was beginning to suspect it wasn't an accident at all. "Sir," his sensor operator called out, "we're detecting human ships emerging from the asteroid field behind us." "That's impossible. We've been monitoring that field." "They weren't hiding in the asteroids, sir. They were using the asteroids themselves as cover, moving with them, making our sensors think they were just more space rocks." The humans had somehow predicted where the Vorthan fleet would position itself and had prepared an ambush using methods that no Vorthan computer could have calculated. The battle continued for 2 more hours. Every time Cathera thought he understood what the humans were doing, they did something completely different. They used debris as weapons, coordinated attacks through methods that seemed like pure chaos, and turned every disadvantage into an advantage. One human pilot actually ejected from his damaged ship, floated through space in just his spacesuit, and somehow managed to plant explosives on a Vorthan destroyer's hull. When asked later how he had calculated the trajectory and timing, the pilot said he had just felt it was right. When the fighting finally ended, Cathera stared at his tactical display in complete disbelief. 37 Vorthan ships destroyed or disabled. The humans had lost only 4 vessels. "Run a tactical analysis," he ordered weakly. "Analysis complete, sir. According to all known military principles, the humans should have been completely destroyed. Their victory probability was calculated at 0.02%. Cathera looked around his bridge at his confused officers. "For 3,000 years, The Vorthan Empire had conquered other races using superior technology and perfect tactical coordination. They had never encountered an enemy that fought like the humans, not following any rules, not using any recognizable strategies, just adapting and improvising moment by moment. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving a message from the human fleet." "What do they say?" "They're asking if we want to surrender." Cathera closed his eyes. His mighty fleet, defeated by a smaller force that fought like they were making up the rules as they went along. How do you fight an enemy that refuses to be predictable? Strategic analyst Velmora sat in her small dark office, surrounded by floating holographic displays showing the same battle footage for the 20th time. She had been studying the human combat recordings for 3 weeks now, and every viewing only made her more confused. The High Command had given her a simple task: figure out how the humans had defeated Admiral Cathera's fleet. Find their tactics, understand their strategy, and develop countermeasures. It should have been easy work for someone with her skills. But the humans made no sense. "Computer, replay section 14 again," she said, rubbing her tired eyes. The hologram showed a human fighter pilot named Johnson, according to the intercepted communications. His ship was damaged, his weapons were nearly empty, and he was being chased by 3 Vorthan interceptors. By all logic, he should have either surrendered or been destroyed. Instead, Johnson did something that violated every principle of space combat. He flew his ship straight into a cloud of metal debris from an earlier explosion. The Vorthan pilots, following proper safety protocols, slowed down and tried to navigate carefully through the dangerous field. Johnson didn't slow down. He flew through the debris at full speed, spinning and rolling his ship like he was dancing. Somehow, he avoided every piece of deadly metal while the spinning motion of his ship created a pattern that confused the Vorthan targeting systems. Then, while still spinning wildly, Johnson fired his remaining missiles backward. The missiles shouldn't have hit anything, the firing angle was all wrong, the timing seemed random. But all 3 missiles found their targets and destroyed the pursuing Vorthan ships. "Computer, analyze Pilot Johnson's decision-making process." Unable to establish logical decision tree. Actions appear to be based on intuitive responses rather than calculated strategies. Velmora made a frustrated sound. Intuitive responses? That wasn't how military combat worked. Every move in battle should be planned, calculated, and based on proven tactics. She switched to another recording, this one showing a human commander named Roberts. His ship was outnumbered 5-1, his shields were failing and his engines were damaged. The logical response would be to retreat or call for help. Instead, Roberts ordered his crew to shut down their main power systems completely. To the Vorthan sensors, it looked like his ship had been destroyed. The Vorthan ships moved closer to confirm the kill, following standard procedure. When they got close enough, Roberts suddenly powered up his ship and fired at point-blank range. The surprise attack destroyed 2 Vorthan vessels before they could react. "Computer, how did Commander Roberts calculate the optimal timing for this maneuver?" Analysis suggests the timing was not calculated. Commander Roberts appeared to make the decision based on what he called gut feeling during intercepted communications. Gut feeling? Velmora had studied military tactics for her entire adult life. She had read every strategic manual, memorized every battle formation, and understood the mathematical principles behind successful warfare. Nothing in her education had prepared her for enemies who fought based on feelings. She pulled up the most confusing recording of all, the final moments of the battle when the human fleet had somehow coordinated a complex attack pattern that seemed completely chaotic. The human ships moved in all directions with no apparent plan. Their communications were filled with strange phrases that made no tactical sense. "Let's try something crazy," and "follow my lead," and "trust me on this one." Yet somehow their scattered, random-looking movements had created the perfect trap. While the Vorthan fleet tried to respond to what looked like chaos, the humans had secretly surrounded them using an attack pattern that no computer could have predicted. Computer, model the human attack strategy and create a defensive response. Unable to model strategy. Human tactical choices do not follow consistent logical parameters. Each decision appears to be made independently without reference to overall strategic planning. Velmora stood up and walked to her window, looking out at the stars. She had spent her entire career believing that warfare was like mathematics, logical, predictable, based on rules that could be learned and applied. The humans had shown her something terrifying. They fought like warfare was art, not science. Every battle was a new creation. Every pilot made decisions that couldn't be programmed into a computer. She thought about her own military training. Vorthan officers learned standard responses to standard situations. If the enemy did A, you responded with B. If they tried strategy C, you countered with tactic D. It was efficient, proven, and reliable. But what happened when the enemy didn't do A or C? What happened when they did something that wasn't in any manual, something that had never been tried before? Her communication panel beeped. It was General Cortese, her superior officer. Analyst Velmora, I need your report on human tactical capabilities. She looked at all the recordings, all the data, all the evidence of human unpredictability. Sir, I need more time. You've had 3 weeks. What have you learned? Velmora hesitated. How could she explain that the humans didn't seem to have tactics in any way that the Vorthans understood? How could she tell a general that the enemy fought by making up new rules in the middle of battle? Sir, the humans appear to base their combat decisions on individual creativity rather than established doctrine. They don't follow patterns we can predict. That's impossible. Every military force has patterns. Find them. After the communication ended, Velmora sat back down and stared at the recordings. She was beginning to suspect something that frightened her. Maybe the humans couldn't be understood because they had learned to fight against enemies who were just as unpredictable as they were. Maybe they had been fighting each other for so long that they had developed ways of thinking that no other species could match. She started a new analysis, this time focusing not on what the humans did, but on why they might have learned to fight this way. The answer, she feared, might be even more disturbing than their impossible victories. Commander James Mitchell crouched behind a pile of broken concrete in what used to be downtown London. 3 months had passed since the Vorthan Empire had invaded Earth, and their occupation forces still moved through the ruined streets like they owned the place. Which, Mitchell supposed they technically did. He watched the alien patrol through his binoculars. 12 Vorthan soldiers walking in perfect formation, their energy weapons held at exactly the same angle, their steps perfectly timed. They followed the exact same route every day at exactly the same time, just like every other patrol in every other occupied city. Emma, you seeing this? He whispered into his radio. Lieutenant Emma Clark's voice crackled back from her position 2 blocks away. Same as always, boss. They're like robots. No variation, no surprises. Private Thomas Baker, hidden in the ruins of an old shop, added his observation. Been watching them for a week now. They stop at the same corners, check the same buildings, even pause for the same amount of time at each checkpoint. Mitchell smiled grimly. The Vorthans thought their predictability was a strength. Perfect discipline, flawless execution, no wasted motion. It would have been impressive if they were fighting other Vorthans. But they weren't fighting other Vorthans. They were fighting humans. Remember the plan, Mitchell said quietly. Tommy, you ready with the surprise? All set, boss. This is going to be fun. The Vorthans had been studying human military tactics from their space battles, trying to understand how humans fought ship to ship. But they had missed something important. Humans had been fighting other humans on the ground for thousands of years. Every trick, every trap, every dirty move had been developed because some other human had tried to counter it. Mitchell watched the patrol approach the intersection where he had planned his ambush. The Vorthans would expect an attack from the obvious positions, the high windows, the side alleys, the clear lines of sight that any military manual would recommend. So Mitchell had planned something completely different. Now, Tommy, he said. The explosion didn't come from above or from the sides. It came from below. Tommy had spent 3 days crawling through the old sewer system, placing charges not in the street, but in the water pipes that ran underneath it. When the charges went off, the street didn't just explode, it collapsed, dropping the entire Vorthan patrol into a hole filled with rushing water and debris. As the aliens struggled in the unexpected pit, Emma's team emerged from their real hiding places. Not from the buildings where any tactician would expect them, but from the storm drains that connected to the sewers. They came up through manholes behind the confused Vorthans, firing from angles that the aliens' training had never prepared them for. The fight lasted less than a minute. The Vorthans, disoriented and trapped in a hole they hadn't expected, couldn't get into proper formation. They had been trained to fight enemies who would attack from logical positions using standard tactics. Emma's team melted back into the underground tunnels before Vorthan reinforcements could arrive. By the time the rescue squad reached the intersection, they found only empty streets and confused reports about humans appearing and disappearing like ghosts. That night, Mitchell's team gathered in an abandoned subway tunnel to plan their next move. The underground had become their world, a maze of sewers, maintenance tunnels, old bomb shelters, and forgotten passages that the Vorthans didn't even know existed. The key, Mitchell explained to a new group of resistance fighters, is that they think like soldiers. professional, disciplined soldiers who follow rules. He drew a simple diagram on the tunnel wall with chalk. They expect us to fight like soldiers too. Set up defensive positions, control territory, engage in direct combat. But we're not soldiers anymore. We're something they've never faced. A young fighter named David raised his hand. What are we then? Mitchell smiled. We're humans fighting for our home. And that's something completely different. He told them about the old wars, back when humans fought each other. The American Revolution, where farmers and shopkeepers had defeated the most professional army in the world by refusing to fight like proper soldiers. World War II, where resistance fighters in occupied countries had driven invaders crazy by attacking from nowhere and vanishing like smoke. The Vorthons conquered other species by being better soldiers than them, Mitchell said. But humans learned to fight by fighting other humans. Every dirty trick we know, some other human invented it first. Every surprise attack we've ever used, we developed it because we had to fight people who were just as smart and desperate as we were. The next morning they put this philosophy to work again. A Vorthon supply convoy was scheduled to pass through the old financial district. The aliens expected an ambush. Their intelligence had detected increased human activity in the area. So Mitchell gave them an ambush. But not the one they expected. The Vorthons found the obvious trap easily, explosives planted in a building overlooking the convoy route, with human fighters visible in the windows. The aliens surrounded the building and prepared to capture the resistance cell. What they didn't know was that the real attack came from Rebecca Walsh's team, who had been hiding inside the supply trucks themselves for the past day. While the Vorthons focused on the decoy fighters in the building, Rebecca's people struck from inside their own convoy. By the time the aliens realized what was happening, half their supplies were destroyed and the humans had vanished again. The fighters in the building turned out to be mannequins dressed in old clothes. How do they do it? Mitchell heard one Vorthon officer ask another over their intercepted communications. How do they always know what we're thinking? Mitchell smiled as he listened. The Vorthons still didn't understand. It wasn't that humans could read their minds. It was that humans had spent thousands of years learning to think like their enemies, because their enemies were other humans, who were just as clever and unpredictable as they were. The Vorthons had conquered the galaxy by being the best at what they did. But humans had survived on Earth by being the best at something completely different, fighting other creatures who were just as good at fighting as they were. And that, Mitchell knew, made all the difference. General Cortese stood on the training field watching his soldiers attempt what the new manual called flexible human-style combat tactics. The sight made his mandibles click in frustration. What had once been the most disciplined military force in the galaxy now looked like a collection of confused children playing war games. Unit 7, he barked into his communicator, maintain your attack formation. Sir, came the uncertain reply from squad leader Vextar, the new orders say we should abandon formation and think creatively like the humans do. Unit 12, explain your current position. Following unpredictability protocols, sir. We're attacking from an unexpected angle. Cortese watched as Unit 12 charged directly into a wall. Their unexpected angle had led them straight into a concrete barrier because they had abandoned all logical thinking in favor of trying to be surprising. The training exercise was supposed to simulate a human resistance attack. For 3 months, the High Command had been studying human tactics, trying to understand how such a primitive species could defeat superior Vorthon forces. The solution, they decided, was to train Vorthon soldiers to fight like humans. It was a disaster. Squad leader Vextar approached the general after his unit had accidentally fired on their own support team. Sir, I don't understand these new orders. For 15 years of training, we learned that coordination and discipline win battles. Now we're told to ignore everything we know and act randomly. Not randomly, Cortese corrected, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. Creatively. Adaptively. Like the humans do. But sir, how can we coordinate an attack if everyone is supposed to act independently? How can we support each other if we don't know what anyone else is doing? It was a good question and Cortese didn't have a good answer. He had been watching recordings of human combat for weeks, trying to understand how they managed to work together while appearing to act completely chaotically. The humans somehow coordinated perfect attacks while having conversations that made no tactical sense. They would say things like, I have an idea, or trust me on this, or let's try something crazy, and then execute complex maneuvers that required split-second timing and perfect cooperation. But when Vorthon soldiers tried to copy this behavior, the results were catastrophic. Without their rigid training and clear command structure, they simply couldn't function as a military unit. Sir, interrupted communications officer Kelvas, we're receiving reports from the field. The 47th Battalion attempted human-style tactics against the resistance fighters in Sector 12. And they were completely defeated, sir. The humans used standard Vorthan military doctrine against them. Korthezi felt a chill run through his body. Explain. The humans formed defensive positions and waited for our forces to attack. When our soldiers tried to be unpredictable, they became scattered and confused. The humans picked them off one by one using textbook Vorthan suppression tactics. This was even worse than Korthezi had feared. The humans weren't just good at being unpredictable, they were also perfectly capable of using traditional military tactics when it suited them. They could switch between chaos and order depending on what their enemy was doing. Sir, said a young officer named Captain Veldana, approaching hesitantly. May I speak freely? Korthezi nodded, grateful for any input that might make sense of this situation. I've been studying the human combat recordings and I think we're approaching this wrong, Veldana said. We're trying to copy what the humans do, but we're not understanding why they do it. Explain. The humans don't fight chaotically because chaos is better than order. They fight chaotically because they've learned to fight against enemies who are just as smart as they are. Every human tactic was developed to counter some other human tactic. Veldana pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's military history. Look at this, sir. 5,000 years of humans fighting other humans. Every weapon, every strategy, every trick was tested against equally intelligent opponents. The display showed ancient battles where humans used cavalry charges, then showed other humans developing spears to stop cavalry. It showed humans building fortified walls, then showed other humans developing siege engines to break those walls. Every advancement was met by a counter-advancement, creating an endless spiral of adaptation. We learned to fight by conquering species with inferior technology, Veldana continued. We won through superior firepower and better discipline. But the humans learned to fight by battling enemies with the same technology and intelligence they had. Korthezi studied the historical data. It was true, the Vorthan Empire had grown by defeating races that couldn't match their military technology. Once they achieved space flight and energy weapons, most conflicts were decided by technological superiority rather than tactical innovation. So you're saying we can't learn to fight like humans because we never needed to develop that kind of adaptability? Exactly, sir. Our soldiers are trained for precision and coordination because that's what works against inferior enemies. But human soldiers are trained to expect that their opponents will be just as clever and desperate as they are. A new report came in from another field commander. The 23rd Regiment had tried to use human-style guerrilla tactics against resistance fighters in the ruins of Berlin. Instead of achieving surprise, they had walked directly into a trap because they didn't understand the difference between human unpredictability and simple random behavior. The humans aren't being random, Veldana explained. They're being adaptive. Every choice they make is a response to what they think we're going to do. But since we're now trying to act like them, we're becoming unpredictable to ourselves, not to them. Korthezi realized the terrible truth. The Vorthans had spent 3,000 years perfecting one way of fighting, overwhelming technological superiority combined with perfect discipline. The humans had spent 5,000 years learning to fight against enemies who could match them in both technology and intelligence. Sir, his communications officer called out urgently, we're receiving priority signals from multiple occupied zones. Human resistance activity is increasing everywhere. Our forces are requesting immediate reinforcement. As reports flooded in of Vorthan defeats across the planet, Korthezi understood that they faced something unprecedented. An enemy that had evolved not by conquering others, but by surviving against opponents just as dangerous as themselves. And that enemy was winning. Admiral Cathera stood in the war room of his flagship, staring at the massive holographic display that showed Earth's military history. What he saw there made his blood run cold and his mandibles click nervously. For 6 hours he had been reviewing thousands of years of human warfare, and the pattern was becoming terrifyingly clear. Show me the section about their world wars again, he ordered his intelligence officer. The hologram shifted to display the 20th century. Cathera watched human armies fighting other human armies with weapons that were nearly identical in capability. Unlike the Vorthan conquests, where superior technology guaranteed victory, these human conflicts showed something different, equally matched opponents forced to outthink each other. Computer, analyze the progression of human military tactics over this period. Analysis complete. Human tactical development shows accelerating innovation cycles. Each new strategy was quickly countered by opposing forces, leading to rapid adaptation and counter-adaptation. Cathera studied a battle called D-Day, where humans had invaded a heavily fortified coastline. The defending humans had built what seemed like perfect defenses: concrete walls, machine gun positions, artillery placements. By all logic, the attack should have failed. But the attacking humans had done something that violated every principle of military science. They had sacrificed thousands of their own soldiers in direct frontal assaults, not because they expected those attacks to succeed, but because they were distractions. While the defenders focused on the obvious threats, other human forces landed in unexpected locations and attacked from behind. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "we're receiving reports from all battle zones. The humans are launching what appears to be their final offensive." Cathera looked at the tactical display showing the space around Earth. The human fleet was approaching, but their formation made no sense at all. Some ships were diving toward the planet's surface, others were heading for the outer system, and a few were actually flying directly toward the strongest Vorthan defensive positions. "Standard defensive formation," he ordered. "Concentrate our forces to protect the most critical positions." But even as he gave the order, Cathera felt a growing sense of dread. After months of studying human tactics, he was beginning to suspect that what looked like chaos was actually something far more sophisticated. Lieutenant Jack Harrison led the first wave of human fighters straight into what should have been certain death. The Vorthan fleet's defensive grid was the most powerful in the galaxy, designed to destroy any attacking force that dared to approach directly. Harrison's squadron flew through the deadly energy beams like they were dancing through rain. His fighters spun and rolled in patterns that seemed random but somehow kept them alive just long enough to reach the Vorthan formation. "All units, execute Harrison's gambit," came the voice of Commander Rebecca Walsh over the communication channels. Cathera had no idea what Harrison's gambit was, but he watched in horror as the human fighters suddenly scattered in all directions, each one heading toward a different Vorthan ship. It looked like they were abandoning their coordinated attack, but then Cathera realized the terrible truth. The scatter pattern wasn't random. Each human fighter was heading for a specific target, and they had timed their movements so perfectly that the Vorthan defensive systems couldn't track them all simultaneously. While the Vorthans tried to respond to Harrison's seemingly suicidal attack, Commander Walsh's forces were already executing the next phase. Her ships emerged from behind Earth's moon, using the planet's gravity to achieve impossible speeds and attack vectors. But the real surprise came from Captain David Roberts, whose ground forces had been hiding inside captured Vorthan supply ships for 3 days. As the space battle raged overhead, Roberts and his soldiers struck at the Vorthan planetary command centers from within their own logistics network. "How?" Cathera whispered as alarm signals blared throughout his ship. "How did they coordinate all of this?" His intelligence officer provided the answer that Cathera had been dreading. "Sir, analysis suggests that each human commander made independent tactical decisions based on their prediction of what the other commanders would do. They didn't coordinate the attack through communications, they coordinated it through understanding each other." This was what Cathera had feared most. The humans weren't just unpredictable to their enemies, they were predictable to each other in ways that outsiders couldn't comprehend. They had fought each other for so long that they had developed an intuitive understanding of how other humans thought. When Harrison attacked the defensive grid, Walsh and Roberts had known without being told that this was their signal to begin their own phases of the assault. When Walsh's ships appeared from behind the moon, the other commanders had adjusted their timing automatically to support her attack. The Vorthan flagship shuddered as human fighters penetrated the defensive perimeter. Cathera watched his tactical display as red warning symbols spread across the screen. His fleet, which had conquered 47 star systems, was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that refused to follow any recognizable patterns. "Sir, hull breach on deck 7. Engine core showing critical damage. Weapons systems failing across the fleet." Cathera closed his eyes and finally understood the bitter truth. The Vorthan Empire had succeeded by being the best at one particular kind of warfare, using superior technology and discipline to defeat less advanced enemies. They had perfected the art of conquering inferior opponents. But the humans had mastered something completely different. They had learned to survive against enemies who were just as intelligent, just as well-equipped, and just as desperate as they were. Every human tactic had been developed to counter other humans who were equally capable of developing counter-tactics. "Sir, the humans are requesting communication." "Open the channel," Cathera said quietly. A human voice came through the speakers, calm and professional. "Admiral Cathera, this is Commander Rebecca Walsh of the Earth Defense Fleet. We're prepared to accept your surrender." Cathera looked around his bridge at his defeated officers. His superior technology meant nothing against an enemy that had spent millennia learning to defeat opponents with equivalent technology. His perfect discipline was useless against humans who had learned to coordinate through pure intuition and mutual understanding. All Vorthan forces stand down, he ordered. We surrender. As the human fleet regrouped around his disabled flagship, Cathera realized the ultimate truth about human unpredictability. They weren't chaotic or random. They were the product of 5,000 years of fighting the most dangerous enemy in the universe, other humans just as clever as themselves. And that was what made them unstoppable.